Good afternoon. Today you will hear about a major investigation that took over 2 years and was codenamed Pee-wee's Playhouse. The main subject is Herman Roche. This joint investigation with the Seattle Police Department culminated in 24 arrests executed this morning by approximately 100 law enforcement officers from 12 federal and local partners, in addition to 4 FBI field offices. You'll hear more about the details of this case from the officials standing here with me today. This joint investigation focused not only on taking harmful drugs off the streets, but also in dismantling the organization behind them. The officials standing here with me today are United States Attorney Jenny Durkin, Assistant United States Attorney Nick Brown with the Western District of Washington, Seattle Police Department Deputy Chief Nick Metz, and FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge Stephen Dean. I would like to turn the podium now to Jenny Durkin for a few comments. We'll get more details of the investigation from those who worked on it very closely, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for coming. I want to thank the FBI, the Seattle Police Department, and the other law enforcement that was involved in this effort. It was a tremendous investigation over a period of years, as Laura's indicated. We are focused very heavily on ending prescription drug abuse and rooting out those criminals responsible for dealing in prescription drugs. As many of you know, it is a growing epidemic in America, and particularly here in the Western District of Washington. Last year, it was estimated that the deaths of overdose for prescription drugs exceeded the number of deaths for motor vehicles. 1 out of 12 high school students has abused prescription drugs. Over 2 million Americans are hooked on prescription drugs. This organization that Agent Dean will describe for you was peddling thousands of drugs on a regular basis into our community. What we also know is that there is a clear nexus between drug dealing and violent crime. We have seen far too much violent crime in this city over a period of years, and the Seattle Police Department has done a number of things on many fronts to resolve that issue. And you'll see here today that they did a tremendous job on uncovering the extent of this trafficking organization with the FBI. It's a great example on what joint investigations can do and how they can make our community safer. So with that, I'll turn the podium over. Thank you, Laura. This is Nick Metz.
Good afternoon. You know, after almost 30 years with the Seattle Police Department, I've had the opportunity to visit a number of agencies throughout this country. And I have to say that throughout my travels, I have not seen the level of collaboration and cooperation and partnership between local and federal law enforcement as we have here in the Great Northwest. So I think we should feel very proud about the type of relationship that we have. And the reason behind that is because this not only with this particular case that we're presenting to you today, but there have been a number of cases over the last year or two that we have been able to showcase some tremendous success because of that collaboration. It's no secret that throughout the last 6+ months we have seen an uptick in violence, particularly in the Rainier Valley area, particularly in the Rainier Beach locations. And we are confident that the arrest of these individuals is going to really help play a significant role in making those neighborhoods and our streets much safer, particularly for those folks who live in those communities. With that, I'd like to have the opportunity to ask Special Agent Steve Dean to come forward.
Good afternoon. Over the past few months, during the past few press conferences, we've all pledged our partnership towards combating violent crime. Today's operation is a continuation of that, and it's very big. 21 people were arrested, and 16 locations were searched across Washington and California. In Washington, the searched cities were Mount Lake Terrace, Kent, Renton, several in Seattle, Federal Way, Tukwila, and Tacoma. The arrest sites in California were Fairfield, Stockton, and Oakland. In addition to Herman Roche, who you've heard about, 18 others were indicted. The names will be in the press release for you to look at. In addition to the FBI and Seattle Police Department, SWAT teams were here from FBI divisions in Portland, Salt Lake City, and San Francisco, as well as use of the FBI's Sacramento SWAT team in Northern California, as well as 12 other federal and local partners who also will be named in the press release. The Safe Streets Gangs Task Force, which is a partnership, a long-standing partnership, I may add, between the Seattle Police Department and the FBI, started this investigation in February of 2010. August 16th, the grand jury returned a true bill indictment against Roche and 18 others. On August 27th, criminal complaints were filed against 5 more subjects. Indictment count 1 is conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, oxycodone. And that's what the charge that all 24 subjects have been charged with. Now, this is an OCDEF, Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force investigation targeting Roche and his drug trafficking organization. And during this investigation, we focused a lot of attention on the Union Street BGDs. As we said, the last 3 times over the last few months, during the last few press conferences, we're a partnership. The agencies that we represent here, we've been together, working together for a long time. We're going to continue it. We're going to continue our efforts to dismantle criminal enterprises. And you better believe we're going to continue our efforts to disrupt violent crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I would just like to reiterate the major scale and the impact of today's operation is unprecedented here in the Seattle Division in this joint effort with the Seattle Police Department. And I think today's efforts have just made the Seattle region a little bit safer. And with that, I'd like to open it up to questions.
Well, how did it work? I'm reading through this, and it sounds like you developed some intel, and then was it phone taps on this one Roche guy that kind of, how'd you get the ball rolling?
Stephen, do you want to field that?
Well, obviously, you've had the opportunity to read the indictment, and you'll see in the indictment that there's use of Title III, electronic surveillance, but there was many other investigative techniques used. So we don't stop the use of those investigative techniques today. So I'll have to, put my hand up and say that's about as far as we're going to go. We're not going to discuss investigative techniques, but you can see through the indictment some of the techniques we use, to include sophisticated investigative techniques like Title III electronic surveillance.
What was Roche's role in the gang hierarchy?
Well, in this criminal enterprise, he was the man. He was the top. He was the head dog, and we took the head dog out.
What was how much of what he was selling were they selling? How much money was it worth? How much business were they doing? How many people? We indicted 24 subjects, and how much money and how much they were doing. I would refer you to the indictment, and I think you can get some of those questions answered in the indictment. Now, as far as
what we were looking at was disrupting a criminal enterprise that was involved in violent crime. A criminal enterprise that was involved in the sale, as the United States Attorney mentioned, of prescription drugs. And you look at the volatility, the volatility of prescription drugs to people who don't have prescriptions, and you look at the related crimes that come from the legal sale of prescription drugs, that's what we were targeting.
what sort of related crimes are you thinking of?
Well, what happens, you think about it, what happens to related crimes of prescription drugs? You have drug addiction, you have violent crimes when someone gets hooked on these drugs, you have robberies, you have a whole gambit of violent crimes, people to do violent and desperate things to support drug habits.
Just how tight was this organization, sir? And will the arrest of Roche stop anything, slow it down? How much did you cripple the organization by these indictments, sir?
Well, I think this indictment will show that we disrupted this organization. I think the indictment will show that most, if not all, this organization is in custody. How much will it slow things down? We think it's going to make a dent.
Do you think any of these individuals or any of these individuals that were indicted connected to any violent crime that's happened so far this year? Is there a direct connection that you can make thus far?
You know, we don't want to comment on anything outside the indictment. What we will say is this, in answering to a couple of the questions that come before this. Number one, in terms of the techniques we used, what I think this indictment shows, and as you read through the indictment and the public records, these operations rely on everything from the street cop doing hand-to-hand buys undercover to very high-tech surveillance techniques. And what the bad guys need to know out there is state and federal authorities are going to cooperate, and we're going to use every technique we have to target violent criminals and drug dealers and those people that are affecting our communities today. So we can't go beyond the document to talk about the specific techniques, but we will say we have a wide array of tools. We will use them all to stop the crime in this community. In terms of this organization, I think if you look at the document, you will see that from top to bottom, we had an ongoing operation for over 2 years through the Seattle Police Department, the FBI, and others, that we were able to make sure that we had the entire organization, so that when we took it down, we took out everything they were doing. It is clear that there is a nexus between drug dealing and violent crime. We don't want to go into specific details, but if you look at the breadth and scope of this organization, the number of trips they were taking to and from California and bringing back thousands of pills per trip, you will see that it is of great scope. Thank
What
you.
did you seize? How many pills or how many firearms? What kinds of firearms, if any?
We seized over 20, I think approximately 20 firearms, about $20,000, $40,000. There were a number of other things. You know, the operation just occurred this morning, so the inventory continues, but we're satisfied that it's a broad scope.
What's next, ma'am? I mean, is it over?
The next step is all of these people have to make their appearance in federal court. I will emphasize, as I do in every press conference, everyone is presumed innocent. These are just charges. They will appear in federal court, and there will be a process now, as it always does, for each of those individuals to go through the process of bringing them to justice.
Take one last question. Do you know how many arrests were made in California related to this?
3 arrests were made in California.
I'm sorry?
3 arrests were made in California.
What about the link to California? Was there the supplier was in California, they were going down there, it was being...
Yes, as you'll see in the documents, the supplier was there. They're making regular trips to California to sustain their drug efforts.
Take a final question.
Are you able to elaborate on any specific of the locations this morning
That's
that were
something that I
searched?
can do if you come and see me afterwards. I
Thank
have a
you.
list. I'll also give you the numbers for the, if you want to pull the rest of the complaints on pacer. But that'll be it.
Thank you very much.
Any appearances
Thank
today?
you.
Yes,
Yes,
the
it's
2:30
2:30.
calendar.